Hello, folks, and welcome to the Just Before Halloween Deep Crawl webinar with Max Prin. Going to get started, Max has a great presentation prepared for us today. But before we get into it, I'm going to ask him a few questions and introduce him to the crowd. So Max has been working with Merkle for 6 years, award-winning agency, lots of interesting data and helping clients from all over the world. But you may know him from technicalseo.com, which is chock full of free tools that I use all the time because I'll never give up my cheap ways. A really incredible blog and Alexa's amazing podcast that has put out, I think, 8 episodes this season. Every single one of them worth a listen. Hi, Max. Welcome to our webinar.
Hi, Ashley, and thank you for having me, and hi, everyone.
I think I might be the only person that dresses up on not Halloween, so sharing my webcam, everyone can enjoy. I promised a half-ass costume, and that is what I'm delivering. Before we get started with your actual presentation, I'm going to ask a few questions. So the first is, where do you live?
I live in Bend, Oregon, which is a beautiful, beautiful place. Really cold right now. It was about 6 degrees this morning, but yes, it's in Central Oregon, so it's not the classic cliche of Oregon. It's very dry here. It's high desert and beautiful, beautiful days throughout the year. So yeah.
One of my favorite places. So I love being reminded that you live in Bend and that not everybody in tech has to live in, you know, the few hubs that we all get shuffled to.
Exactly.
Now I'm going to ask you, you publish a lot and you experiment a lot. What is one of the things you're most proud of publishing so far this year?
Oh, that's a great question. That would be the redesign of technicalseo.com, I think, more than an article or which actually I don't do much, but like do a lot of presentations and conferences. But this year in April, we 4 years after the initial launch of the website, we completely revamped the user interface and everything. So really proud of that. It's so much easier to use and with a design that is familiar to everybody. It looks like the Search Console. It's actually based on the Google Material design framework. So it looks like, you know, like Deep Crawl, like all those tools, like with the side nav bar, and so it's a comfortable design for everybody to use.
Yeah, it's really clean to use. If you had to sum up what the goal is or why you created technical SEO in a sentence, what would you tell folks? You can use 2 sentences. I'm feeling very generous, but technicalseo.com is a unique hub with a lot of great content. So where did that come from, or what do you hope people gain from it?
Yeah, that's a good question. It comes from my laziness. Basically, I got, after, I don't know, like a year doing my job, like supporting the team at Merkle, got a little bit tired of repeating myself and doing the same task over and over, and especially like complicated one, like reviewing hreflang tags through a large international website. And so looking out there on the internet, seeing like a lot of free tools existing, like robots.txt and a bunch of like htaccess, regex, like all the things, but I found some of them missing or not too as good as I wish they would be. So I started developing tools like to fill those gaps for myself and my team. And you know, in this industry, one of the bad things is people sharing, and I found that like there's no reason for us to keep those tools just for ourselves if it can help other people, especially like, I don't know, freelance SEOs, like webmaster, like, I don't know, small business owners that are doing things by themselves that could help them there. So that was the idea behind putting it public.
It's my favorite part of the industry is there's a lot of sharing. There's nothing to really lose from us sharing data and strategies with each other. There's always good work to be done. But tell me what you think the worst habit of our industry is. Where are we falling short?
That's a great question. And I usually don't go into this conversation too much, you know, but like I think, and that actually I watched this video this morning that was shared on Twitter about that was Barack Obama like talking about the call out culture. And I think like especially lately, I've seen a lot of that, like people just calling out like some subpar articles or around like BERT, or the same thing happened with Ring Brain. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of like people in the large digital marketing industry sharing as much as possible, like maybe inaccurate fact or things like that. And that's true, that happens. But there's a lot of people jumping on that and just like calling out without doing anything about it either. So it doesn't, like Barack Obama said like this morning in that video, like it doesn't take you anywhere just to call out people if you don't do anything yourself. So I don't know, that might not be like the most important thing, but that's what I'm thinking about right now since this video this morning.
Culture is important, and I think that affects it for sure. Um, Obama, I miss him. If we could bring him back, that would be amazing. So you can't use Obama for this next question. I want to know if there's anyone in the industry that you'd really love to meet that you haven't met in person yet.
I would love to meet Matt Katz. I know he's not really part of that industry anymore, I mean, not directly involved in the SEO community, but I think like learning SEO through his videos, and I've never had a chance to meet him, and so
Yeah, he's shaped the industry a lot, and I think what I appreciate most was the positivity. I can't imagine that it was an easy job to do, but genuinely warm and friendly and kind. And I like that that was the foundation that Google helped to put out as the SEO industry is built up. So,
yeah.
okay.
And actually, just to follow up on that, the reason why that might be someone that is not in the industry anymore, it's because I'm extremely lucky. I get to speak at, and I'm gonna do that less, but in the last like 3 years, I've got the opportunities to speak at a lot of conferences and meet a lot of people. So,
Yeah.
which was really nice.
Do you have anything queued up for the end of the year, or early next year? Anywhere where you're speaking you want to toss out there?
No, I have nothing left. I will be attending a couple of conferences by the end of the year. The Chrome Dev Summit in a couple of weeks in San Francisco, and Tech SEO Boost in Boston, just to go see some friends and support Alexis, who will be speaking there. But no, I have no more conferences queued up, and yeah, no plans.
Awesome. All right, last question before I let you present. Halloween is one of my most favorite holidays. Tell me about one of the most memorable costumes you had as a kid, or blunders that you had during Halloween as a kid. I want to know what baby Max dressed up as.
Oh yeah, I don't remember, but I have a picture somewhere in my parents', I don't know, garage of me like dressed up as Mickey Mouse, and that's pretty epic.
That is not scary at all.
Yeah, that is not scary, but like that's the only thing I can really remember. Oh, I was like dressed up as The Mask, Jim Carrey, like but
That's
I
impressive.
wasn't
Dated
again not,
yourself.
yeah, my mom did like the costume by herself, like she saw the entire thing, like, so yeah, it was pretty cool.
That's very cool. I'm actually Twitter. I love you. I'm gonna hop over there and grab a quick SEO Halloween hashtag, because all I want today is to see your old Halloween costumes, or even your new ones. So Max, take us away. Keep us on task for AMP and PWAs while I go, distract just a little bit on the side and see if we can get some Halloween pictures rolling in.
Awesome. So let's see.
There we go, and you should have presentership.
All right, show main screen. Yeah, I have like 5 screens, so that is this one.
Sharing in public is always a little terrifying. I take a deep breath every time.
All right, that's fine. I closed
Yep.
pretty much everything, but I have like 4 monitors plus the iPad. Like I like monitors. Anyway, so is it working? Yeah.
Yep, I can see your presentation. I think you're ready to go.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you, and let's go. Yeah. So in maybe to start, this presentation, or what we're going to talk about, is not really like selling, especially not AMP, or in a way that you might think or might have heard, like without the, I don't know, since 2016, I think that AMP was launched. So it's the idea, like pretty much everything else that we do, making the best out of frameworks, tools, anything that is available to us. And so I think there's an opportunity here to use AMP in a way that not just to please Google or to respond to an educated C-level request, just to make the best out of it for the users, and at the same time for the bots, because as simple as it sounds, like a great user experience that is not being understood by search engine bots won't pay off in the results. So with that said, let's get started. And if I do that, perfect. Okay, well, yeah, so that is me. And so I am the head of technical SEO at Mocal, so I have the chance to work with pretty much all the teams and the clients that we support for SEO, and I love it. So as I just said, like a great user experience needs to be understood by search engine. And as you can see here, there's a few things that like you would try to achieve, being relevant, obviously mobile friendly, fast, secure, and popular. And search engine, they look at those things from a little bit different perspective, but similar like terms. And today we're gonna really like focus on mobile friendly, mobile design, and being fast. But just to be clear around like speed, and there was a video just posted this morning, like Ask the Google Webmaster video with like Martin Splitt and John Mueller. It was posted this morning. I recommend watching that. They are answering a few questions around speed, like in the context of SEO. But what is important to remember, as Martin is explaining in that video, is there's no perfect metrics, and when Google tries to assess the speed of a website, really what they're trying to understand is it really, really fast and really awesome, or is it like terribly like slow? And when we talk about the speed update, like coming to that came to mobile like almost 2 years ago at this point, or actually a year and a half ago, they are trying to penalize, and that's a heavy word, but like penalize really slow site. That's the only thing like really that's gonna have like a bad impact. Like a really fast website is not going to rank better than a fast website just because of that. Obviously, there's a lot of factors and criteria, but that's important to remember when, again, like the publication and maybe like decision makers and everybody is telling we need to be faster, then yes, that's a great thing to do, but it's not for SEO. You're doing that for the users and the conversion, obviously. So you can see a lot of like those metrics. This is pretty old already, but there's a lot of those out there where you will see those, industry-wide or like vertical like metrics around like page speed and the bounce rate and the things. But the best thing to do is really to see like the impact on your website. An easy way to relatively easy way to do that is to create like a custom report in Google Analytics. And again, it's not perfect, but that gives you a trend and an idea of like the correlation between like your conversion rate, if you have that set up as a goal in Google Analytics, and the average page load time on the site. And in this example here, we can see that there's somewhat a correlation. So just to see if really there would be an impact, and again, past like the industry-wide metrics that you see out there. The other thing, moving onto like the mobile-friendly aspect, is that the tools like this one, which is great. It's if you don't have access to Search Console, let's say you're looking at like a prospect website or a competitor or something, you don't have access to Search Console, that's definitely like the best tool, like the most advanced from Google here in terms of rendering with like Chrome and everything, the mobile-friendly testing tool. But mobile friendly in the definition of Google, it's looking at a few criteria, as the viewport set and like the size of the font and things like that. It doesn't mean that it's mobile optimized. And here you can see an example here where that particular URL page will pass the test and the tool will tell you that it's mobile friendly, but really is it? We can't really tell that that page or say that that page is mobile optimized. So a few things can be done, well, actually a lot of things, but I want to highlight a couple things that can be done to go from mobile friendly to really mobile optimized. And a couple of things that are really underused right now is hidden content. And so again, that's a pretty heavy term here, but in the past, or still maybe currently, if your site has not been moved over to the mobile first index, Google was devaluing or the content that would not be directly accessible to users. We're talking about tabs, accordions, click to expand, like read more, that type of things. Even if the content is right there in the code, it's kind of hidden via CSS and just to create a better user experience maybe. But in the past with the desktop index, that content will be seen, will be indexed, but will be not given the value that other piece of content that will be directly accessible. With the mobile first index is different because Google understand that you may use those techniques and those designs to create a better user experience, to avoid users to having to scroll forever. And so this is a great way, to be mobile optimized. And right now with mobile first index, again, there's no issue with that. The content will be given the same value. Obviously, as long as the content is there, that means that it needs to be loaded, it needs to be there in the document object model, the DOM, or the source code when the page first load. If the content of tab 2 or the accordion is only loaded when the user clicks, then this is not going to work because Googlebot is as awesome as it is being developed, like it's still a lazy user, and Googlebot does not click or scroll, or at least not consistently, and we cannot rely on that for discoverability of our content. The other thing is the picture element in the source set, which allows you to specify different size, different pictures all together, like maybe a cropped version of a picture for mobile, and that will also help with page speed if you make sure to load like a small version of the picture for mobile, while the super HD for desktop. So, and a lot of enterprise level like CMS and things like that are leveraging this. So it's getting better, but still underused technology here. So let's talk about like web apps, and I promise everything that we're talking about here will be put back together as we go through the presentation. So web apps, they exist. They've been existing for a really long time, but they do not have the capability of native apps, access to some of the hardware that you have on the phone, like the camera and things like that, or the GPS and other things. So, but native apps, they don't have the reach of the web. They are extremely expensive. Like the customer acquisition is cost a lot. People uninstall apps all the time. Actually, the average number of downloaded apps per user in the United States per month is 0. So there is like somewhat an issue here that can be fixed with the web. And that's where progressive web app enter. Like the idea is to keep the reach of the web, but increase the capabilities. And not everything is possible yet. I'm a big fan of like face recognition or like the fingerprint, like to access apps like banking and things like that. You cannot do that with progressive web apps yet, but for retail, for a bunch of other industries and different verticals, there may be opportunities here. So progressive web apps, again, it's not new, but just to recap here, they are generally like reliable and fast. It's all based on what the developer will make out of it, but it needs to be secure for the service worker to work. And the service worker is the JavaScript proxy basically that powers the progressive web app. And so in general, it will be designed as, being mobile friendly, and it will be fast if the caching mechanism are well set up. Once the app has been loaded for the first time, so that's why there is an asterisk here. It might not be super fast the first time, but it will be after that if things are cached locally. And it's engaging. Nobody likes actually push notifications. People reject those all the time. But if you develop like a great brand and people love your brand, they will accept the push notification, which will make engaging much better. And obviously, adding the icon to the home screen helps as well. But by default, out of the box, this is not really search friendly or SEO friendly, if we can use that term. Google bots, it's obviously they are getting better, desktop and smartphone, but mainly Google bot smartphone, and as well as like Bing, that is also going to be evergreen. But there's some stuff that are still not properly working. For example, lazy loading. So it was announced last year at Google I/O that, or this year actually, that with Evergreen Google Bot, lazy loading will be much easier with the intersection observer API, and but we in the wild I've not seen that working that well. Anyway, we could talk about that more. But the other thing is, we mentioned that before, the user triggered content. This is not something wrong with Googlebot. This is just things that developers will put in place because that will help with speed. So imagine again those tabs, accordion, or even mega menu. I think I've seen that a lot. That practice of only loading the links in the menu once the user over the top category menu, the main navigation. And again, that might be great or helping with page speed, but it doesn't help at all with crawlability of the website, accessibility of the links, proper signaling of the site hierarchy. And so that needs to be fixed, or at least taken into consideration with rendering techniques and things like that. But let's talk about lazy loading just really fast. And so, yeah, the intersection observer is supposed to be supported. But here we found in this example, which is using Lozad, I think it's one of the library that even Google documentations recommend to implement lazy loading. Images that are not in the viewport will not be loaded according to the tool. And maybe there's a glitch with the tool, but still I've tested on the live website and none of the images that are below the fold, not in the viewport, are being indexed. So one of the things that we can do is to use the NoScript tag that it's being used here. That will solve the problem, but even better, the native image lazy loading attribute, which now works in Chrome already. And this will solve all the issues because the image won't be loaded until it's needed, but we still have a proper image tag with the source equal with a proper URL for bots to access, parse, and index. So basically here, all of that to say that things will get better and easy without doing anything. Now, moving on to AMP. I have mixed feeling, like a lot of people. I have mixed feeling about AMP. I did not like the fact that it was mandatory for news publisher. At the time, we worked with a couple of news publisher, and that was not really nice to see that kind of adopt or die, because you're not gonna, if your pages are not AMP, you're not gonna be in the news carousel and things like that. So that pressure was not not really nice. But there's a lot of great thing about AMP and the project and the people that work on that project. It pushed people and developers to work on their speed. The concept behind AMP is awesome. The idea of like using minimalist code and just using what you need and it's extremely good. And more than adopting AMP or using the framework itself, like using the concept and the rules of AMP to increase like to decrease page speed, sorry, to increase page speed yeah, bref. So anyway, that should be taken into consideration. So the other great thing about AMP is the cache, the CDN, and you can do that for your own website without using AMP. You can use those concepts. You can have like a CDN. But one thing that will not be available for any other page that is not AMP is the preloading into the search results. And for that reason, AMP will be the fastest way to load your page from the search results. There's no better way to do that. So the idea, what we're going to talk about right now, is to use AMP at the very least for that reason. One great concern about AMP since it was released is the URL. Webmasters, like marketers, were concerned about that URL showing up for the user in the search result, like in Google, being a Google URL and not your website. That has been fixed with like the signed exchanges. It's quite complicated, and to be honest, I've not implemented it myself like from scratch, because there is a simple way to do that for free if you're using Cloudflare. And if you're not, again, you can set up any website for free there. And that's just one checkbox. And you can have the signed exchange like implemented for your website through Cloudflare for free. And it works great. The other concern was, which was kind of the point of AMP, is to limit JavaScript. But developers wanted a little bit more, being able to have some custom JavaScript. So that has been also released. And there's some restrictions, but still, like you can add some custom JavaScript to your AMP pages. So all of that kind of to say that even for e-commerce right now with the AMP framework, you can create like compelling pages, attractive pages that will have all the basic features that you need on category pages, on product pages, like filtering, searching, like sorting product, even logging in and out for returning users, carousels and things like that to organize your comment, your reviews, and selection. There's all of those components and modules of AMP that exist for you to develop, or your developers to develop those pages that will be almost as good as the normal website. You can even add to the cart directly. The problem though is creating the full experience, the full like transactional like join, because the payment is still like an issue. So there's an API like the payment request. Unfortunately, it only works in Chrome right now, and so not really good with like the number of like iOS users and Safari. But so yeah, the solution here is to redirect users to the website. And so if that is the solution and we want to use AMP for the speed out of the search result, then the idea, the concept here that I want to talk about is redirecting users to the normal website as soon as they leave the first AMP page. And so I'm going to go into like some details here. The other problem with AMP from the beginning was adding a new URL. And so again, a lot of great things and amazing developers working on the AMP framework, but adding a new URL to the mix, to me, that was like SEO 101, like consolidation, like canonicalization of URLs, and adding a new one, even though the signals to put in place were pretty clear, it was just a canonical tag, still, you have like one more URL to deal with. And so that thing that you can see here is the official like workflow or like a scheme like for on the AMP project website, if in case you had like AMP version of your site and a desktop and still a separate like AMP dot for mobile, for example, and international version of your site. This is what you have to put in place for all the signals to be right. And this is a nightmare. This is a real nightmare at the enterprise level. This is not manageable. So the idea, the goal is to go there, to only have like one set of URLs for everything, except for international, it's still best practice to have like separate URLs for that. But still, one URL for desktop, for mobile, for AMP, for iOS, for Android, for everything, for your progressive web app. And we can do that. So how do we get the best of both worlds here? How do we get AMP for initial user acquisition, for that like amazing speed from the search results, and at the same time like the capabilities of the PWA, all of it on the same URL for a seamless user experience and a seamless bot experience. So there was like three ways, official ways documented by the AMP project team when it comes to combining AMP and PWA together. The first one is to have AMP pages with PWA features. The second one is to have AMP as a data source for your PWA. And the third one, I'm not going to go into details for the first two here. Like we're going to really talk about the one in the middle here, using AMP as an entry point, because this is the implementation that fits really what we are trying to achieve here. Again, like using AMP for the best that it has to offer, like the speed from the search result, in my opinion, at least, and move on to the progressive web app as soon as possible. So going back to the progressive web apps and what powers it, like the service worker. So the service worker, again, it's a small JavaScript file that sits client side in the browser, and it powers pretty much everything about like the progressive web app. So it will dictate the caching mechanism and where to get the information from, and that amazing little file can be installed from the AMP pages with this module AMP install service worker. So that's the key here. That's how we're going to achieve what we are trying to do. So this is what it will look like. So, and I'm going to explain, obviously. So users go to Google, they land on the AMP page. When they're on that AMP page, the service worker will be installed, and it will download what we call the app shell, pretty much like the framework for your app, like CSS, like JavaScript, logos, and top navigation, like the header and footer and things like that. So pretty much everything that you need to get started for your app. Then when the users click, the service worker that has been installed will intercept, hijack basically, will intercept the click, and instead of sending the user to a different URL, it will keep the user on the same URL set, so send the user to the URL that was requested, but instead of giving them a new AMP version of the page, they will give the service worker, the server, will give like the PWA version. That will load extremely fast because pretty much everything except the main content would have been cached before when the user was navigating the AMP version. And then in the context of e-commerce here, you can keep shopping fast and you make money. But again, we want to have all of that on the same URL, and unfortunately, there's not enough information about that. According to the AMP framework website, the AMP project website, there's mainly two situations that exist, according to them. Having your canonical pages, which is on top of AMP, AMP on top of your normal website, which is a classic scenario, or your canonical site is actually AMP, but they don't talk about having like both on the same URL set. And that's our goal. Again, we're trying to achieve this. So I'm going to show you a little bit of code here, but it's pretty straightforward, so don't be afraid. This is the service worker. This is actually the service worker that I've used on the demo site that I've developed. I'm still working on it, still a work in progress, but that part, the meat, the main thing here is working. So the idea of the function here is that the service worker will, again, intercept the click when the request is a navigation request. And instead of like sending that particular URL that was requested, the service worker will fetch the URL, but append a parameter that could be anything you want, but here it's like PWA equals true. And then if it's not a navigational request, as you can see at the second part of the code here, it will just fetch the normal URL that could be like a CSS, an image, JavaScript, anything. Then the server, in the case of like, this is a code for htaccess file here for an Apache server. The server itself will look for that parameter. And if the parameter exists, PWA equals true, then the server will give for that particular URL, it's a URL rewrite, there's no redirect happening here. It will give like the PWA version of the website and not the normal one, which would be by default the AMP. There's a couple more things happening here. We're also looking at like the referrer, because if you don't have like the real AMP URL, like with Cloudflare or like the sign exchanged in place, there's some stuff going on when people, users go from the AMP version of the page from Google search result to your website. So looking at the referrer can also help making sure to serve the PWA version. And so a great way to demo that, instead of a live demo, because we know how those go, I have recorded a video here. And so you can see that the user like clicks on the AMP result, it loads relatively fast. Look at the URL at the top, it's the website itself, it's not the AMP viewer. We can see we're on the AMP version with the site navigation here. I kept like, you will see the site a little bit different to show. So the user is on the category page, they click on the product page, and right now we're still on the same classic URL set, but we are on the PWA. And you can see that here the menu is a bit different. It's a drop down from the top. And we're going back to the category page here and to the home page, and we are only on the PWA. So you guys will have access to obviously the deck here, the presentation. So if that was too fast, you can take a look at it later. But that's the idea. Everything happening on the same URL. One thing to mention is AMP images. So the way most of AMP works is they require like specific tags to be used instead of normal tags. So, and that's the case for images. So to be able to, for the framework to deliver the lazy load on all images, they require developers to use AMP image as a tag, HTML tag, instead of the normal image one. And usually that is not an issue because those images that will reference in your AMP image tags, they will also be accessible on the main website that Google also crawls. But here, remember, we're talking about like having Google crawl only one URL, one set of URL, and that will be the AMP pages, always. In that case, Google will only see those AMP images tag. And when Google renders pages, they will usually like transform those JavaScript implementations and everything and see proper tags. It turns out that Google does not render AMP pages because they are so well structured and simple to parse that there is no real need for Googlebot to go and spend resources and time rendering those pages. That means that Google will never ever see the normal image tag with the source attribute. So in that particular case, like we do need absolutely to use this NoScript tag to submit and specify the normal image tag with the source attribute. Extremely important here. Until the AMP framework updates to simply the native lazy loading, and so we won't have to deal with that anymore. So what about SEO? Because it's a question that marketers often like ask, and sometimes developers as well. Like, what's the point of doing all of that? Is it going to increase our rankings? And so, taking those shortcuts. So answering some of those questions. What about SEO? Then the first thing is that bots will only crawl and index the AMP version, which is not a bad thing because it will provide the same content and a good user experience that search engines can assess and reward you for it. It will be fast. It will be mobile friendly. So those two things won't have to be a concern. The fact that it will only crawl one set of URL will be like providing like clear signaling. You don't have to deal with like those canonical and alternate tags like that you would have with the normal AMP separate from your normal website. And also it's for enterprise level, maybe where crawl budget is a concern, which it's not most of the time for most websites, but it might be for millions of pages type website. Then having one set of URL will also help there with like crawl budget and crawling resources from the Google side and other search engine. Lastly, the demo website that I was talking about, like you can access it right now. It's PWAMP.site, so PWAMP.site. Bear with me, it's a work in progress, like not a big fan of the template right now, but pictures and everything, but it's working for the purpose of demonstrating like everything that we covered here. It is working. The service worker, you can access that in the Chrome DevTools in the code. You can see how that works, like going from the AMP version to the PWA on the same URL. All of that is working. So take a look at it if you're interested. Send it to your developers if you're not a developer yourself. And yeah, the other thing is PWAMPworks.com by Alida. It's a great resource. Like she has listed like pretty much everything available out there when it comes to the documentation. Those 3 techniques that we mentioned around like combining PWAs and AMP, so not just the entry point one, but like the 2 others. She's also talking about that there and listing like example resources that exist. So if you're interested in those concepts, like definitely go check out that website. And with that said, I think that's all I have. Oh,
let's see. Can you hear me now, Max?
Yeah.
All right. I have a few housekeeping items real quick before I jump into questions that I was too excited about and didn't mention at the beginning of the webinar. So first up, this will be recorded and will be available on our DeepCrawl blog, or will be emailed if you're on the list tomorrow. There is a short survey at the end of the webinar. Nobody loves surveys, but we love your feedback and we want to keep doing these and make them useful. So let us know what you think. As a reward, anyone in the webinar right now will get exclusive access to the next white paper that we are publishing from Rachel Costello, and it's specifically on how devs and SEOs work together, and it's really fantastic. So look for the link in the chat. And finally, our next webinar is on the 13th of November with Miss Michelle Robbins, who is brilliant, and she'll be talking about clicks, conversions, and crawls and analyzing clickstream data. So there will be some, I think, pretty good technical and complex questions to ask then. Are you ready for a few questions?
Yes.
Fabulous. We had a few come in. The first one is from Enoch Raccoon. What is the effect of adding AMP if my audience uses an iPhone? So what is the difference for Android and iPhone users?
I don't think there's any. It might be for progressive web app, but is that working? Okay, thought I lost you. So for AMP, I really I can't think of any difference here, because really it's served by Google and other platform on their website directly via AMP viewer. So there's no real difference. It might be for progressive web app. Not everything it's getting better. Safari is not rejecting anything that needs to be accomplished for PWAs, but it takes more time for them to put them together, those things, than Chrome. So.
Got it. Are there any additional security risks of using PWAs or AMP that you know of?
So unfortunately, I cannot go into too many details because I need to do the research. But I was talking with Tom Anthony from Distill like a few weeks ago, and he mentioned that the sign exchange, apparently, which came as like a great idea to fix that AMP URL problem, was actually like a security risk for the web at large. I don't have any more info, but yeah, I guess people can reach out to Tom Anthony on Twitter and ask him for more info. Like he talked about that in his presentation at SMX Advance in Berlin a few weeks ago. So that might be the only thing that I can think of. But no, again, not sure why at this point.
That would be great. So Jagdish had a couple questions specific to just performance in general. So if there is just one speed KPI that you should focus on when you have a URL that contains video, what would you focus on?
Well, there's, I guess, two parts, but if we put the video on top of that, I don't know what KPI I would primarily use. I know that I would not use the total load time, that's for sure, because it does not really matter. I mean, you can have like a really heavy, long, video. It does not really matter how long it takes to fully load that video if it starts playing right away. It's not like when you go to Netflix and start a movie in 4K, or when you go and watch a 2-minute video on YouTube, it does not really matter how big the file is. So the total load time should not matter as long as the user can start watching right away. So, but like the best metrics, there's so many of them. Again, the video I mentioned with Martin and John from this morning, I think like I recommend go and watch that, because they talk about those metrics. There's so many that just using one is not the right thing to do or to think.
I think from my experience, if you can, with any sort of multimedia elements, is use time to interactive. That one seems to be one that helps us so that we know when the users can engage with the media. Again, though, it's a grain of salt with all of it. A lot of businesses for a lot of SEOs and businesses are at heads when it comes to metrics and measuring the effectiveness of AMP or PWA and how much they should invest in it. What I would like to know is, when do you know it's time to pull the plug on your progressive web app that you've invested in, or AMP pages?
Do you mean like pull the plug, like to switch to it, to migrate to it?
So let's say you have switched to it and you have invested resources in building it out, but with metrics being kind of difficult, at what point, and you having to invest in and continue to update it, at what point for a business would you say it's not worth maintaining the separate platforms and pages?
Interesting. Never really thought about that, because I mean, in the context of PWAs, because I don't think of anything wrong or bad about them. There's nothing that PWAs, like, there are so many things you can do with it. It can only improve the user experience. I think, here what we talked about is using AMP for the speed out of the search result. And maybe if like developing AMP is time consuming, and developers like they'd rather, like, I don't know, make the main website extremely fast and focus on that, then maybe that's time to pull the plug on AMP. you know.
Yeah.
But from a PWA standpoint, like really, I think like everybody should, there should be in their plan, if not already, like to develop a site as a progressive web app for sure.
I think that's a good answer.
Website.
That's totally acceptable.
Yeah.
Just because AMP does take quite a few more resources, and I think a lot about the Guardian and Washington Post case, where Washington Post got a lot of benefit off of, building AMP and beta with Google and speeding up their site, whereas the Guardian had already invested so much in their mobile experience that it didn't make sense for them to invest all the resources to create their own AMP version. They were already doing really well.
Makes sense.
What's your favorite PWA out there?
Technicalseo.com.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
I have one that I like to point out a lot, but it's sort of a sad case because I love the content on it. I think it's a brilliant idea and presented well, but it's a good example of what could go wrong for SEO with PWAs, and that's Pokedex.org. So if you're into Pokemon, that site has an amazing amount of content and interactive content, but if you go to do a site query, only one page is indexed, and it breaks my heart. It was used as a demo at least 2 years ago. So I know nobody's, it's an open source project and not getting a lot of love, but I like to see what PWAs can do, but also use it as a warning to, be mindful of how you're pushing out there and interacting with users, because we want your good work to be found.
Exactly. That's one thing we did not talk about today, the different like rendering technologies and strategies, and because I don't know, that's a rabbit hole, like everything can be done, like but yeah, and it's extremely important, again, to be discoverable and crawlable.
I just want all the Pokemon to litter the search index, so if someone can fix that on that open source site, that would be fantastic. Great. Is there anything you want to close with before we wrap this up? We're at 4 minutes to the top of the hour.
No, except that if there's any other question, I think we'll do a follow-up, but like people can reach out to me on Twitter. I'm not showing my screen anymore, but like it was on all the slides. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Like I'm not super active on Twitter. I only post like updates on technicalseo.com, but like I'm there all the time. So if people ping me, I will answer.
That's great. And we'll be sure to include it as well when we post the blog, and we'll be gathering up any questions that came in that we weren't able to get to. And so we can maybe answer those offline and publish that with the blog as well. Just another quick reminder, answer that survey if you can, and check the chat for that link to Rachel's white paper. It's already in the chat, so you should be able to get it there. And have a really fantastic and safe Halloween. Please keep me company and send me some of your Halloween photos, especially of your animals. I've already caught some pups on there. So the Deep Crawl Gang is on Twitter all the time. I'm at Berman Hale, and the hashtag SEO Halloween is where I'm asking people to send me all of their Halloween kitsch.
Perfect. We'll send a picture of my kids.
Please do. All right. Thank you, everyone. My
son's going to be a kitchen.
Have a good Halloween.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you for having me.